All right. Hello, hello. That
Hello.
was a little quicker than the first time.
Yeah, the internet's on.
Oh yeah, we're good to go. So it's filling in. We've got 10-ish people coming and there's more signing on, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. This is the joint celebration for World Soil Day between the Living Soil Symposium here in Oregon with the Regeneration Canada group up in Montreal, who hosted the Living Soil Symposium in Montreal. Uh, when was that? A couple months ago now, about a month ago now.
October 13th and to 15th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those dates are ingrained in your mind forever because you played a critical role in that. This is Vivian Kaloxilos, I hope I said that correctly, of DocTerre, and she's a living soil consultant up in the Montreal area. Do you want to give a 30-second introduction for what you do up there?
Sure. Yeah. I am in the south part of Quebec and I run a soil food web lab. So I receive soil samples and compost samples from farmers or landscapers or companies. I also provide consultation on how to improve people's soils using living soil science, compost teas, and compost extracts, as well as agroecological principles.
Awesome.
And I work with agronomers and I work with tons of other people in collaboration to do these things.
Now, we didn't really get that much time to talk when I was up there in Montreal at the event, but you, for everyone who didn't get to see, she did an awesome presentation. The introduction of the first day, I think, you kind of set the tone for the majority of the event for the people that were there. And I think that video is going to be up sometime early 2018, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, the whole presentation will be available for free.
Awesome. Well, that's a big thanks for everyone, from everyone, for putting that out there for free. I think that's something very similar that we all believe in, is that this information should be available to everyone. So um, let's dive right into our topic for the day. So we talked a little bit before, and we want to discuss what are the best ways to teach people about soil. So, I'm from Texas, which is kind of unfortunately a soil desert. There's a lot of farmers there, but not the most biologically friendly farmers. And so I do a lot of education myself and talking to people, and everyone knows on varying levels why soil is important, but a lot of people just have no idea how to go about teaching that. So first off, let's start with, to you, what does soil mean to you?
To me,
Yes.
wow. No one's ever asked me that before. It's a cool question. Soil to me is where life begins and ends in many senses, because the soil and the soil microbes, they will decompose what has died, and they'll recycle those nutrients and provide them back into the web of life so
Hmm.
that more things can be born.
Yeah.
But also that, we live on planet Earth and the Earth is alive. And civilizations have risen and fallen because of the way they treated their soils. So that's soil is life for me.
That's awesome. Great definition. I can't take credit for that question. Actually, the founder of the symposium, Chris Jagger, gave me that one. So shout out to
Okay.
him. But yeah, I'm glad you like it. We'll continue with that question for future interviews. But
Mm-hmm.
so knowing your definition of soil, what's your favorite way when you approach someone who is, maybe you're kind of just standing in the line at the grocery store together, and you see that they have conventional produce, and you maybe want to casually start a conversation with them on why the alternative is better and how it has to do with soil?
Yeah, well, usually when people who I randomly meet, and good small talk for ice breaking is, so what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I'm a soil ecologist,
People
and
say, "What
I
ecologist? What animals live in
what
soil?"
does that mean? And I say, well, I help I help people transition to regenerative soil practices, and they go, oh, cool, but and they're still kind of puzzled. And I go, essentially, I make soil. I make and I help people make soil probiotics. And it's kind of like when we take an antibiotic, we're killing off whatever is causing us to be ill, but we're also killing off our beneficial gut flora. And if we never take a probiotic after the antibiotic, then we're always going to have something wrong with this.
Yeah.
Whether it's that we're not going to be absorbing our minerals or our nutrients kind of just pass right through us, or we are susceptible to whatever seasonal cold or flu is going around. This is our gut flora. This is our immune system. And so we need to take probiotics to bring back this beneficial biology so that our bodies can function properly and healthy without the need for external supplements.
Okay.
And it's the same with the soil. So I help people bring these good microbes and make kind of soil probiotics for their land. And that's when people go, oh, okay, yeah, really interesting,
yeah,
cool. Because it's something that we can all agree on and grasp. We all have human bodies, at least we all think we do. It is, we all have human bodies, and we all know the importance of having good gut flora, and we all know the logic of taking probiotics, and so it's an analogy that anyone can understand. And so whether it's
and that point too, you kind of pull in the whole relationship between the absence of that and being more susceptible to illness or not being able to bring the nutrition in that's needed, and that's a good analogy, definitely.
Yeah, and so it's whether it's the person who's just small talking me somewhere, or even a client like a farmer or a golf course, or someone that is considering this approach, but it's very much a new way of looking at the interaction between us and how we manage our soil. And so it can be very difficult if I go in there and just start talking about fungi and nematodes and protozoa.
Just maybe a little bit foreign language to some people.
So we start with something that people can relate to, and the human body is something we can all relate to. And
how much of your role do you think, so you're on this, your personal mission kind of is to build these regenerative living soil systems, right? And how much of a role do you think the actual building of those systems plays versus versus education about those systems that you're teaching other people, like percentage-wise?
That's a very good question again. The actual regeneration, obviously it can be a lot of work depending on how bad the situation is, but the real hard work is absolutely the human mind. And education and awareness. Like for me, I, as a lab and as a consultant of soil food web practices, and just soil microbes and ecology, I haven't spent too much time marketing and doing regular business promotion that you would tend to do and you would need to do, because the market needed to be built. People needed to know that this was out there and existed and it's possible and they can do it, or they can get services for it. So my first few years, I did have clients in the smaller kind of market gardening, smaller production, in the homesteading. Obviously, the permaculture folks were into it. Urban gardening, small scale, but I spent a lot of time doing really accessible workshops.
Got it.
Very cheap, donation-based introduction workshops.
Generate some buzz around the idea.
just to, yeah, to let people know. And I did so much of that. And then people talk because so many people hear this. And, you know, we're human. We have evolved because of the conditions that these microbes have helped set into the atmosphere. And we come from this earth. And so it just, you hear it, it just makes a lot of sense. And so people are talking about it, and they're up there. So many people, I see them, they all of a sudden have all these new ideas, and they're really passionate. And that word has spread. And then obviously, with the symposium, we did the Living Soil Symposium in Montreal at Concordia University, and now the buzz is even greater. So in terms of promotion, my marketing approach has been education.
That's awesome.
And it absolutely, because once people believe, the rest, you know, is just about getting it done, and we know how to get it done. It's been replicated on every continent. And
well, so let me play devil's advocate here then. Imagine I am just Joe Schmo at the grocery store, and I'm going to pretend, I don't even have to pretend, I am Texan. So I'm going to pretend I'm from Texas and I know nothing about organic farming or anything like that. Sorry, Texans that are like-minded as me for throwing you under the bus, but for the sake of conversation, aren't you going to lose yield when you don't use fertilizers? You know, like ammonium fertilizers and stuff. So how can we feed the world that way?
Right. Actually, it's the reverse. Right now, what we're seeing is the long-term use of these fertilizers is actually decreasing yield. And farmers are getting into situations where they see, and if you talk to farmers, they will tell you that their bushels per acre, or their yield per acre, is decreasing every year. And the amount of these products that they have to use are getting more expensive, and they're being told to just use more of them as their yields go down. Okay, we'll just use more. And actually, I've a few farmers in mind who were on the edge of losing their farms. And these are farms that were family generational farms, and they don't want to be the generation to shut it down because the yield, it's just not worth it monetarily anymore because the yields are so low. And they switch to these practices, and they're seeing the yield go skyrocketing back up, and that the amount of money they actually need to put into that fertility is decreasing as well because it's much more efficient. So not only are they getting more yield, but they're actually saving money on their soil work too. And now with this part,
No, keep going, go ahead.
And also if carbon farming ever becomes more of a mainstream thing where it's not just measuring the carbon above the ground. Right now that's where carbon farming is measuring the growth of trees. Every living thing on Earth has carbon. For us, we have 30 carbon molecules for every nitrogen molecule in our human body.
Wow.
And the soil, every living organism in the soil also has a carbon-nitrogen ratio. Every humic and fulvic acid molecule has a carbon-nitrogen ratio. And there's actually you can probably sequester 15 times more carbon in the soil than in a tree above ground, depending on where it is in its growth stage. So if we can have more yield of higher nutrient-dense food, lower irrigation rates, while spending less money getting those results, plus hopefully them being rewarded for this change on the carbon market, I mean, it's just so worth it. And for us, we get more nutrient-dense food, and we're healthier human beings as well. So for the average Joe in the grocery store, I'd say you ask a farmer about how their yields have been declining and about the prices of these inputs and how much they're going up and that it's wearing them out.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see too. I wonder how many farmers people actually know, you know, like that they could go have those conversations for. It almost seems like the problem just isn't being talked about because there aren't connections being made between the people on the receiving end of the problem versus the benefiting end of the problem, which are the consumers benefiting from these foods that are coming out that they don't have to think twice about, you know?
Yeah, and it's we should be thinking and considering the well-being of our farmers way more than we are, because they keep us alive. They feed us, people in the cities and us urbanites. Oh, I'm not in the city, but I used to be at some point for a few years. And these farmers, they feed our civilizations, and but the thing is it's a lot of work to be a farmer. It's
Definitely.
a lot of work, and they don't really have time to
Market.
do more than they're already doing.
Yeah.
They're doing a big job. So
Well, that's why we need more people like yourself and the team up there at Regeneration Canada helping spread the word for sure. We've got a question from Let's Grow, and I want to hit that because it's on topic right now to what we're talking about. But they said, when farmers typically transition to organic farming, aren't they going to see a yield decrease initially?
No. What I've seen and what others I work with have seen. So firstly, some farmers will transition. Not all farmers will transition 100% away from chemicals. In the first years, they might decrease and decrease.
Okay,
let's
right?
say, what's that?
I said, which is okay, right?
Yeah, it's okay. It's their farm. It's their risk that they feel they're taking, and that's fine. And the biology still helps. And I had just met with a man here who works with farmers all over Quebec and helps them work with the soil microbes. And this farmer had reduced his chemical input by 40% and replaced that 40% with biology.
Okay.
And he's already seen an increase in yield. I think Elaine Ingham has many examples of this. It's very rare that a farmer will go cold turkey and switch, and there's some he will, but only on certain sections of their land because they're trying to test it out. But they always see an increase in yield right away if they're doing things properly, and often they need that guidance.
Exactly. I think that's the key, right? Is if, I've been listening a lot to Gabe Brown recently, and I know he really encourages the idea of a transition period instead of a transition date. And also, when you employ the experts there that can help you, you're going to avoid some of the pitfalls of not setting the system up properly, where you could have big losses, crop loss, crop yield decreases, where it's going to be detrimental during that period.
Yes, and I've heard of situations where this happened, and it's usually because guidelines aren't followed. It's kind of like when your doctor puts you on antibiotics and says, make sure you're taking probiotics, and you go and you take your probiotic and your antibiotic in one go, and they cancel each other out. And so it's really, if you're going to be putting out biology, don't go putting your chemicals out right away after. You do the reverse. You put your chemicals, let it do its thing, and then put your biology, and then leave it.
Got it.
Take your antibiotic, let it do its thing, but take your probiotic after and chill for a sec.
Well,
and it's in situations where these approaches get mixed up, you would see a decrease, and there have been cases in that. So it's really, there needs to be some kind of guidance. But farmers are not simple people. They're intelligent, and most of them grasp these ideas very quickly.
Definitely. Well, so, and again, for the people who just joined, this is just for the sake of argument. I don't actually do this, but, I go out on my sidewalk and I have to spray the weeds that are popping up with Roundup because I want them to go away, and some other chemicals that I have. If that's just in my sidewalk, if farmers don't use those things, aren't we going to have a huge problem with the pests and the diseases that are running over these crops already?
Pests and diseases are a symptom that these crops are not happy, and the soil is out of balance. It's where it all begins. And so if we stop using chemicals and instead work to bring back the immune system of the plants in the soil, which is the soil microbes, then we will see these diseases and pests problems level out.
Wow. I mean, just like that. That's it.
Well, I mean, obviously it takes time. but you will see that the pests are indicating to you that there's an imbalance in the system. That's what it means. And it's nature's way of coming and bringing balance back.
Definitely.
So and it's these issues start in the soil, and the plant's immune system, its gut flora, are the soil microbes that are growing around its roots. So if we don't have the right gut flora, then we're going to be attracting problems like diseases and pests.
Makes sense.
Outbreaks. But when we rebalance that soil, a plant's immune system, a plant's gut flora, which is the soil microbes, then we will see those problems level out as well.
Makes sense. It really does. You're building resiliency back into the system almost, to where it can cope with the problems internally instead of with external inputs. So along the lines of what Nick at Night is asking, he was mentioning how you could tell if you have good soil in your garden or your farm or whatever. On the contrary, let's talk about some of the warning signs that you should be looking out for if your soil isn't good. What are some of the telltale signs that you could see as someone who's using the soil to get something out of it?
Right. Okay, so one thing is, if you put your shovel in and you have a really hard time getting through and you really got to push and it's compacted, boom, you've got a soil issue right there.
Okay.
Compaction, you're going to have to deal with it, because imagine if the roofs of our houses collapsed on us. There's no room for there's no room for life. There's no room to live. So if in these compacted areas, there's no room for oxygen and water, and the only things that can grow in those conditions are diseases. So if you have very tough to get through soil, boom, right there, you've got to work on it. The color of your soil. So at the top you have things growing, and you have maybe organic matter, and then hopefully you'll have a humus layer, that dark brown chewed up organic matter.
Oh yeah, the good stuff.
If that layer isn't there, you have a soil issue. Okay. And then underneath that is where the earth starts, the soil, your topsoil. And the color of that, if it's kind of colorless, if it's not that nice dark color, not black, but like 70% dark chocolate brown, you're lacking in nutrients and minerals. You can have really nice engineered organic matter that's dark, but if there's no life in it, then it's useless as well. So some people have that nice organic matter, but there's no life in it, and you'll be able to tell because your plants' leaf colors are weird, or there's disease, or there's pest infestations. Another thing is, if you dig a hole and you open up and you see what's going on and you see no earthworms, that's also a sign that things are probably not going too well. If you see that the roots aren't growing very deep, that's also another sign. And if you see that the thickness of the layer of the dark soil is very shallow, then it's going to be tough for your plants to grow in as well. So these are all things that you can see very easily. You can also put like a PVC pipe, fill it with water, and see if the water drains too quickly or doesn't drain at all. And then you can tell about your drainage issues. These are all easy. And then you can do them year to year, and you can see, oh, I have 2 more inches of nice soil. I have humus starting to form. Yay, there's earthworms.
So cool.
And it's really easy, or yay, my shovel is going in very easily this year. These are all really easy tricks that people can do to see how their soil is, and even to monitor it over time.
That's awesome. Well, one thing I want to do real quick on that note, you're talking about water infiltration. And so, every day I'm looking up new stuff about what people are doing in this kind of regenerative ag, living soils movement. And I'm learning new examples all the time. And one of my favorite new examples is a gentleman in North Dakota. It's Gabe Brown and his farm, where he said he's been doing living soils practices in transition over the last 20 years. and their water infiltration rate went from half an inch per hour to over 8 inches per hour in water infiltration. I mean, is it going to take 20 years for someone to be able to achieve something like that?
Mm-hmm. No, well, I mean, it depends on the approach that they use. There are a lot of different approaches that could be considered regenerative agriculture.
Mm.
And there's a lot of them, even things like agroecological and permaculture principles. These things work. Cover cropping, no-till, these things work. And they help to build soil, but it takes time. But it does work, but it takes time. And it's when we get into soil food web science and we are incorporating actively aerated compost teas, or also known as liquid biological amendments, this is when we can see results in seasons. And that's where it gets interesting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I think some of the key takeaways so far are that you don't necessarily have to lose on yields even when you first transition. In fact, you're probably going to see, with the help of a professional, you're probably going to see increases in yield each season after that. You're going to see increased resiliency in your system against pests and disease. You're going to see better water infiltration and retention. You don't have to be as concerned with treating your soils all of the time with these chemicals, because you're replacing it with biology and with proper mineral nutrition. Let's see, what else in summary have we talked about?
And I just want to say, like, when you do these transitions, you want to make sure you're working with the right people, because there are cases where people have decreases in yields in the first years of transition. But there are other documented cases where you really make sure the full food web is present in these inoculums that you're putting in, where you actually see the opposite. You see already, even when chemicals are still being used, an increase in yield.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for anyone to check out in the West Coast of the U.S. that you know of?
Man, the West Coast is less my territory. I'm on the East Coast. But there's a really cool, we had one of the speakers at the Living Soil Symposium in Montreal was a farmer called Blaine Hiertas.
Yeah.
I think it's Hjeertas, but I might be wrong. And he's a regenerative livestock farmer. He doesn't use soil food web necessarily, but he does regenerative grazing, and he's great. And he would be a good reference. And aside from that, I know that probably Elaine would have more references, since she works mostly in Oregon and California and knows people in that area. I know that, I mean, you guys are, I don't know where you are in the world, but I know that in British Columbia and even Saskatchewan and Alberta in Canada, there are more and more farms, large-scale farmers, that are starting this, to incorporate these regenerative practices. And I've spoken to farmers that have 5,000 hectares of grain, you know.
Wow. I think
and they're switching like to compost
12,000 acres. I think that's 12,000 acres-ish.
It's a lot of land, and these are big farmers. These people feed the nation, and they're very important. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time. Yeah. And if any of this interests you, get involved, because listen, there's no competition. We live on planet Earth, and there is so much soil to treat, and people to not convince, but we need to become allies with our farmers and these golf course owners and the municipalities that have, you know, we need to become allies with these people if we're gonna even, like we said, there's a whole educational component that needs to come first. People need to connect their hearts with the land again and see, okay, yes, it's the soil, and just make it make sense. So if this interests you, there's so many ways in which you can get involved. And we have a lot of work to do. And it's not just agricultural land, it's soil, and that's all of Earth.
Oh yeah.
So even our forests are not regenerating as well as we want, as they should be, because of the biodiversity loss and the loss of manure is being dropped, and they're not regenerating. And you know, there's even work to be done on that front. There's work to be done in decontamination and cleaning up spills and cleaning up eutrophicated lakes. All of these things are soil problems. It relates to human health, and there are doctors now working with soil microbiologists because they're realizing the connection between the soil biology and our microbes in our body and our immune system.
Right. Very cool.
So there's so many ways in which people can get involved. It's not just becoming a farmer or becoming a consultant. So there's lots of room, and the time is now, because I said this at the conference, time won't stop and wait for us to wake up. So this is the task of our time, and we can only do it together and foster a spirit of open source exchange of information so that we can move this science along as fast as we can.
Definitely. Well, if everyone just went and spent 5 minutes telling someone about everything you just laid out in summary to someone else that has never heard about this before, I guarantee you they would be more than interested to go and Google it. Point them in the direction of Regeneration Canada. They're an awesome organization. They're about to post their videos from the Living Soil Symposium in Montreal here in the coming month. So that's an excellent place to direct people to. If you guys talk to anyone who wants to know more about soil, of course, there are other great organizations, the Land Institute, Patagonia Provisions, and their work with Unbroken Ground. That's an excellent film. I love showing that film to people as an introduction. Do you have any other resources that you think are good to point people in that direction for?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many groups. There's the Alan Savory group. There's the whole Regeneration International group. There's Project Drawdown, which I highly encourage people to check out. There's Kiss the Ground, the Carbon Underground. There's Soil Food Web Inc. Elaine's, I mean, you like what you heard tonight, and in the more sciencey aspect, you need to hear Dr. Elaine Ingham speak. And yeah, I mean, even if your contribution is talking to 5 people this week and like making them aware of this, that's huge.
Definitely.
It's huge. Yeah.
Definitely. I bet there's a good conversation everyone can have at least once a day if they just stuck their neck out a little bit and tried, and you'd find that the conversations end up being a lot more collaborative and insightful for both sides once you start having them. It's exciting.
Yeah. We need collaboration because, you know, we still have more questions than answers, right? And there's a lot of technical aspects to figure out, like how do we apply this in countries where farmers can't afford compost thermometers, right? But yeah, I think the most important thing is if what you can do is just help be a voice for the earth, the actual earth, the soil, because it doesn't have a voice to speak up, but we do, so we can spread the word.
That's awesome. Well, I was going to think of some creative closing, but I think that was beautifully put right there. So I want to say thank you so much for your time. That was awesome.
Thank you, Chris.
Where can people find more information about yourself and what you do?
Yes, so I have a website that's coming up shortly. I had to take it down because the French and English sides had blended together. It will be coming back up. It's www.docterre.ca, so DOCTERRE. And my DocTerre is terre in French is soil, like tierra in Spanish. And it's kind of a play on words for soil doctor. So DocTerre.
That's cool.
And it's in French because I'm in Quebec.
That's awesome. And in the meantime, it was very much more French than I expected too. It was the first time that I'd been to that area. So it was an excellent experience. But you have a Facebook page as well, don't you, that people can find you on right now?
Yes. Yes, I do have a Facebook page. It's DocTerre, DocTerre. And you can find me on there. You can, and through there, you can get my contact information, and also the website coming back up next week. All of that will be up as well.
Awesome. For the people still asking, DocTerre. DocTerre. Okay, Vivian, thank you so much. It was good talking to you. I'm glad you're well.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chris. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.